I opened my late wife's jewelry box that morning without thinking. When I look back now, that was the moment everything quietly shifted beneath my feet. If you're watching this, tell me where you're from or what time it is. The house was still in that calm kind of silence that only exists after dawn, too soft to disturb, too delicate to trust. I sat at the edge of the bed with the box resting on my knees, its oak lid warm from the sunlight reaching across the room like a gentle hand. Lily had chosen that box herself years ago, back when her laughter still lived in these walls. She used to say, a wooden box made memories breathe differently. I never understood that until she was gone. When I lifted the lid, the faint scent of her perfume drifted up jasmine, the one she wore on ordinary days. The one she never replaced because she said it already smelled like home. I didn't cry, but something tightened behind my eyes. Grief doesn't always break loudly. Sometimes it just sits beside you and waits. Inside the box, everything was exactly where she'd left it. Her delicate silver chain, the pearl earrings from our 15th anniversary, the emerald brooch her mother gave her, and the simple wedding band she traded her engagement ring for because she said it felt more honest. Touching each piece felt like touching old conversations, tiny echoes of who she was. When nobody else was watching, that's when I heard footsteps in the hallway. My daughter Claire appeared at the door as if she'd timed her arrival with the moment the lid opened. She said she came just to check on me, but her eyes went straight to the box on my lap before she even sat down. She didn't try to hide it. She didn't have to. I've known her face for 35 years. I can read tension in her smile the way I can read weather in the sky. "Oh," she said, keeping her voice light, "you're going through Mom's things today." Her tone was gentle, too gentle. The kind of gentleness someone uses when they're steering a conversation toward a destination. "You haven't agreed to visit?" I told her I was fine, that I just wanted to revisit a few things. She nodded, but the pause between her breaths was too long, too measured. Claire used to be effortless. Now she was rehearsed. Like she had practiced this conversation in her car before walking in. She picked up the pearl earrings, turning them carefully between her fingers. "You know," she murmured, "these shouldn't just stay locked away. Things like this. They should be with someone who appreciates them." She meant herself. The implication hung in the air with the weight of an unopened envelope. I didn't argue. I didn't even react. There was a time I would have mistaken her eagerness for sentimentality, but grief sharpens your perception. You see motives where you once only saw faces. So I just gave a soft answer, something neutral, and closed the subject. At least I thought I did. When she set the earrings down, a folded slip of paper beneath them caught her eye. She asked what it was, but I already knew Lily's handwritten inventory list. She made it 2 years before she passed names of every item, where it came from, and tiny notes beside each piece. Lily was organized in a way that made you feel taken care of, even long after she was gone. I picked up the paper before Claire could. The ink had faded slightly, but Lily's handwriting was still unmistakable, steady, confident, the way she was when she believed in something. The list wasn't meant for distribution or legal proof. It was meant for memory. But to Claire, it was something else entirely. A map. "Maybe we should talk about what happens with everything now," Claire said, her tone casual, but her shoulders too still. "You know? So it doesn't become stressful later." I let the words sit. I could feel her watching me, waiting for an opening, waiting for a permission I wasn't ready to give. Outside, a bird landed on the window ledge, tapping once against the glass as if trying to warn me I wasn't alone in this conversation. Claire reached for her handbag, pretending to tidy her things. But in the small reflection of the vanity mirror, I saw her angle her phone toward the jewelry box. She snapped a photo when she thought. I wasn't looking. Everything inside me went very quiet. Not angry. Not hurt. Just aware, and awareness changes everything. By the time she left, promising to help me organize everything soon, I had already folded Lily's list and slipped it into my pocket. Claire thought today was about jewelry, but Lily had always known it was about something deeper, something that would start unraveling soon. And as the door closed behind my daughter, I realized this was only the beginning. I didn't expect breakfast to turn into a negotiation. When I look back now, that was the moment I realized my daughter wasn't visiting. She was planning. The morning light was soft, filtered through the pale curtains Lily had chosen long before she got sick. They cast these faint stripes across the kitchen table. The same pattern we used to joke made everything look like an old photograph. I was stirring my tea, trying to ignore the hollow quiet of the house. When Claire walked in with the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes, she said she brought pastries. But the box was barely warm. She hadn't baked them herself, and she hadn't bought them on the way over. She had stopped somewhere else first. She sat down across from me, folded her hands neatly, and gave me that careful, measured look, the one people use when they want something but don't want you to notice. I could tell she was rehearsing her lines behind her eyes, you know? She began softly, "It's good you're going through Mom's things. It's healthy. Organization helps with closure." Closure. A word she only ever used when she wanted to speed up someone else's healing. I nodded politely. Claire took this as an invitation. "I've been thinking," she said, picking at the corner of her napkin. "Maybe I could help you. Sort everything. You shouldn't carry all of this alone. Not at your age." She added the last part, casually, as if age was something she just remembered existed. I didn't correct her. I simply sipped my tea. She shifted in her chair, leaning forward. "Dad, the jewelry shouldn't just sit there. It deserves to be worn, appreciated, maybe even protected properly." She meant evaluated, cataloged. From the way her voice softened, I could tell she had practiced the phrasing. I asked her gently, "Protected from what, Claire?" She hesitated only 1 second, but 1 second is all it takes for truth to appear. From well time, from loss. You know, things can disappear if they're not cataloged. There it was, the word she kept pushing toward, cataloged. The sunlight caught the gold chain around her neck, something Ethan had given her last year. Her fingers touched it without thinking. The way a person checks their grip before reaching for something more. I didn't respond. Silence, I've learned, reveals more than confrontation ever does. She exhaled quietly, then opened her handbag and pulled out a piece of paper, a crisp, freshly printed form. It was an appraisal request. Not downloaded randomly. Not something she stumbled upon. Fully filled out. Name, Michael Warren. Contact number, her own. Signature line empty. She slid it onto the table like a lawyer, presenting evidence. "You should think about getting everything professionally valued," she said. "It just makes things easier for everyone later." She didn't mean everyone. I looked down at the paper, the faint smell of toner still clinging to it. The appraisal categories were itemized. Rings, necklaces, gemstones, heirlooms. Someone had highlighted the section for items of significant value. That wasn't my handwriting. I didn't touch the form. She took my stillness as hesitation. "If you want," she continued, "I can handle the appointment. You don't have to worry about logistics. I'm already familiar with the process because Ethan had to get a few things appraised last month." There it was, his name, slipping in at the edges, a shadow behind her words. I folded the napkin slowly, buying time. Claire watched my hands, waiting for agreement. Instead, I asked her how her week had been. A simple question, an escape route. But she didn't take it. She gently nudged the form closer to me, aligning it with the stripes of sunlight, as if positioning it for a photograph. "You should think about this," she repeated, her voice a little firmer. "Mom wouldn't want her things wasting away in a drawer." Lily wouldn't have said that. And Claire knew it. The room suddenly felt colder, even though the tea was still steaming. I gave her a small, quiet smile, the kind that hides more than it reveals, and said I'd consider it. That single word satisfied her enough to shift topics. She talked about her new work project, about dinner plans, about a friend's vacation. Normal things. Comforting things. Things she used to talk about without any underlying motive. But the form stayed on the table between us, like a silent witness. When she finally stood up to leave, she pretended to forget it. She folded her scarf, zipped her handbag, checked her phone, and walked toward the door. Then she paused. "Oh," she said lightly, "I guess I left something behind." She didn't pick it up. She wanted me to. After she left, the house grew quiet again. Too quiet. I stared at the form, feeling a slow shift inside. Me, the kind that warns you a storm is forming far beyond the horizon. I didn't throw it away. I didn't sign it either, but I kept it. Because sometimes paper tells you more about people than their words ever will. I didn't mean to see Claire's phone light up. It was sitting on the counter beside the sink, and the screen simply woke on its own. When I look back now, that moment told me more than any conversation we had that week. The kettle had just finished boiling, filling the kitchen with that soft hiss that always reminded me of early winter mornings with Lily. I poured the water into a mug and let the tea bag drift. Claire was in the living room, talking loudly about redesigning her guest bedroom too loudly, almost as if trying to drown out the quiet tension between us. Her phone buzzed. A single message preview lit the screen. "Ethan, did he say yes?" Just 5 words. But they opened a door I had been quietly avoiding. I stood there for a moment, the weight of that message settling somewhere deep in my chest. Not anger, not even betrayal, just recognition. Recognition that this wasn't impulsive. It was coordinated, discussed. Planned. Claire walked back into the kitchen, little too quickly, as if she'd felt the shift in the air. She grabbed her phone before I could move away from it and pressed the screen against her palm. "Oh, sorry. Just work stuff. You know how it is." But her voice was tight, the way a violin string feels just before it snaps. I didn't confront her. I didn't need to. Instead, I asked whether she wanted more tea. The question surprised her. She blinked twice, as if trying to recalibrate the energy in the room. Then forced a smile. "No, Dad, I'm fine." She moved around the kitchen with artificial ease, talking about how she and Ethan might sell their townhouse in the next year or two. She said they wanted something bigger, something future-oriented, future-oriented. I stirred my tea. "Sounds like a big step," she nodded too eagerly. "We're planning ahead. You know, building security, making sure we're not stressed later." The implication hung in the space between us. Her security, their future. Their stress, not mine. Claire set her phone down again, screen downward. This time then walked over to the window and pretended to admire the yard. But her shoulders were pulled tight, her posture stiff. She was waiting for me to bring up the message. I didn't. Silence can be more powerful than interrogation. She turned back, changing the subject abruptly. "Oh, I wanted to show you something." She unlocked her phone, scrolled quickly, and opened an image. Then she placed the phone on the counter facing me. "Just some ideas for organizing Mom's things," she said. A visual reference. But the screen wasn't showing organization ideas. It was a screenshot of appraised jewelry, values columns of numbers, gem grades, and estimated worth. A currency figure at the bottom, highlighted in yellow. The total value was higher than I remembered. "Oops," Claire said, snatching the phone too quickly. Wrong picture. Right intention," she fumbled, opened a different folder, and finally showed me a photograph of a neatly arranged drawer organizer, the kind people use for scarves or belts. But her hand was still trembling slightly, betraying the rehearsed calm in her voice. I nodded politely, pretending not to notice. Inside me, something settled like a puzzle piece clicking into place. Lily had warned me once. Years ago, during a long drive home from visiting friends, she said people reveal themselves most clearly when they think no one is paying attention. I didn't understand it back then. I do now. Claire spent the next 15 minutes talking about colors, textures, efficiency systems. All the while, her phone buzzed twice more. She never turned the screen around again. When she finally left, the house returned to its quiet rhythm. I washed the mug, placed it on the drying rack, and sat at the table with the afternoon sun warming my shoulder. And I realized something important. It wasn't the message from Ethan that unsettled me. It was the urgency behind it, as I wiped the counter. I noticed Claire had left her notebook behind, slim, leather-bound one she carried for work. I didn't open it, but a torn piece of paper stuck out from the last page. It held a faint outline of shapes, numbers, and a column labeled potential value. What caught my eye was something even smaller, a side note scribbled in Ethan's handwriting. Move early if possible. I didn't know what that meant yet, but I would soon. I didn't expect a routine checkup to teach me something about my own daughter. But looking back, that morning was the first time a stranger noticed what my family didn't. The clinic smelled faintly of antiseptic and lemon wipes as sterile. Predictable scent that usually made me feel strangely comfortable. The waiting room was quiet, except for the soft hum of the air conditioner and the rustle of magazines, old enough to count as antiques. I came in for the usual blood pressure, cholesterol panel, the standard conversation about men my age. Nothing dramatic, nothing emotional, or so I thought. I checked in, took a seat, and let my mind drift. The past week had been unusually heavy. Claire's eagerness, Ethan's message, the appraisal screenshot she pretended I didn't see. It all sat on my chest like an invisible weight. But stress doesn't make a sound. It just presses quietly until someone asks the right question. Mr. Warren. I looked up. A young nurse stood in the doorway, mid-20s, soft features, calm eyes that seemed to pay attention to things people usually missed. Her name tag read Hannah. She led me inside with a kind of gentleness that didn't feel forced. Some healthcare workers rush patients through rooms like items on a checklist. Hannah didn't. She walked slowly beside me, matching my pace without making a point of it. She took my vitals, scribbling neatly on her chart. Your blood pressure's a little higher than last time, she noted quietly. Anything different this week? I opened my mouth to say the usual, no, nothing unusual, but the truth hesitated in my throat. Instead, I gave a non-committal shrug. Hannah didn't push. She simply nodded and handed me a medical stress evaluation form. Just routine, she said. But it helps us understand the bigger picture. I sat with the form in my lap, answering questions that seemed too small for the size of the emotions buried beneath them. Trouble sleeping. Occasional. Loss of appetite, some days. Feeling overwhelmed. More than I wanted to admit. I filled out the checkboxes honestly, maybe for the first time in months. When I handed it back, Hannah scanned it quickly. Her eyes softened not with pity, but with recognition. Mr. Warren, she said gently. Sometimes people say they're fine long after they've stopped being fine. Her words were simple, but they landed in a place I didn't know was exposed. I cleared my throat and avoided her eyes. It's been a long year, losing someone. She asked, but not the way people ask when they're trying to pry. More like she was offering a place for the truth to sit. Yes, I answered. My wife. She nodded once. No cliches. No empty condolences. Just understanding. And now my daughter is trying to help, I added. Though the word help tasted wrong as soon as I said it, Hannah didn't comment. But she circled a few items on the stress form quietly. Precisely. Just so the doctor sees the real picture, she said. Sometimes families mean well, but they don't always see the pressure they create. Pressure. An accurate word. As she guided me to the exam room, a folded piece of paper slipped from my coat pocket and landed on the floor tiles. Handwritten jewelry inventory. I hadn't meant to bring it, but I must have tucked it into my jacket absent-mindedly. Hannah bent to pick it up, glanced at it for the briefest moment, and froze not in curiosity. But in recognition, this writing, she murmured. I've seen this before. I felt a strange pull in my chest. You knew my wife? She hesitated, searching her memory. Years ago, she came in once during my early training. She was kind, very kind. I didn't forget her. A warmth spread through me, strange, unexpected. Hannah wasn't exaggerating. The sincerity in her voice was unmistakable. She handed the paper back carefully, as if it were something fragile. People like her, she said softly, leave a mark. Her words lingered in the air long after she stepped out to fetch the doctor, and I realized something. Claire had been pushing. Ethan had been planning. But this young nurse, someone who owed me nothing, noticed my stress within minutes. Not because she wanted something, because she cared enough to look. When the appointment was over, Hannah walked me out. Before I left, she touched the stress form again and said, "If things ever feel off at home, don't brush it aside. Pressure disguised as concern can do more damage than people realize." I stopped halfway to the door. "Why would you say that?" She smiled sadly. "Because people calculate, but not always for the right reasons." Her tone wasn't accusing. It was protective. Outside, the wind was colder than I expected. I stood by my car for a moment, watching reflections ripple across the clinic's glass doors. For the first time, I wondered if the jewelry wasn't the whole story, if something deeper was shifting beneath the surface. I didn't realize how thin my walls were until someone else heard what I tried to ignore. When I look back, that knock on the door was the moment the truth stopped being private. The afternoon had been quiet, almost unnaturally so. The kind of quiet that makes you think the house itself is holding its breath. I was sitting in the living room, sorting through mail that mostly didn't matter. Odds. Bills. A letter from the bank when I heard a faint tapping on the driveway. Not on the door. On the driveway. Hesitant, polite, almost apologetic. I stood up slowly, expecting maybe a delivery driver or someone leaving flyers. Instead, it was Tom Brooks, my neighbor for nearly 15 years. He lived across the street, a retired firefighter with a calm voice and shoulders that still looked strong. Enough to carry someone out of a burning building. He lifted a hand in greeting. "Hey, Michael. Got a second?" Tom wasn't the kind of man who made unnecessary visits. He respected privacy more than most people I knew. So for him to come over, unannounced, meant something had unsettled him. I stepped outside, letting the door stay half open behind me. "Everything all right?" He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. I wasn't sure if I should mention this, but I figured you'd rather hear it from me than wonder later. My pulse tightened. "What happened?" Tom exhaled, looking anywhere but my face. "I heard raised voices coming from your place yesterday." "When your daughter was here?" Of course he had. Claire wasn't yelling, but she was speaking with a sharpness designed to cut quietly. I tried to brush it off. "Just a disagreement. Nothing unusual." Tom nodded, but something in his expression told me that wasn't the end of what he came to say. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone, tapping the screen a few times. "My security camera picked up audio from your driveway. Not video, just the mic. It's sensitive. Picks up more than I'd like it to, honestly." I felt a slow, cold tension move through me. "What did it record?" He turned the screen toward me. A timestamp glowed at the top. Yesterday, 2:14 p.m. Below it, simple audio player. "I didn't listen at first," Tom said quietly. "But I recognized Claire's voice, and she sounded firm. I thought you might want to know." I hesitated, then pressed play. The audio wasn't crystal clear, it was distant. Slightly muffled, but the words still cut through. "Claire, he's dragging this out. Ethan, he won't say yes unless we push him." Pause. A sigh, Claire again, softer but sharper. "He doesn't need those things. He doesn't even know what to do with them anymore." The clip ended as the wind brushed over the microphone. I stood there in the cool air, staring at the screen long after the audio stopped. Tom gave me space, his voice steady. "I know it's not my place. I just didn't like how it sounded." I didn't like it either. Hearing something is different from reading intentions in someone's eyes. The words become undeniable. Fixed, recorded. "Thanks, Tom," I said after a long moment. "I appreciate you telling me." He nodded, still uneasy. "If you ever need anything at all, just knock." When he walked back home, the driveway felt strangely longer than usual, as if the distance between my front door and the world beyond had stretched. I went back inside. Closing the door gently behind me, the house felt heavier now, as if Claire's words were still hanging in the air, echoing through the rooms Lily once filled with warmth. I sat at the dining table and replayed the conversation silently in my mind. Claire wasn't frustrated. She was strategizing, planning, coordinating, and she wasn't talking to me. She was talking about me for the first time. I realized I wasn't part of her plan, I was an obstacle within it. As I sat there, my fingers brushed the edge of Lily's inventory list still tucked inside my pocket. Her handwriting felt like a reminder, a quiet hand on my shoulder guiding me through a storm I didn't see forming. The realization settled in gently but firmly. My daughter wasn't just asking, she was preparing for a version of the future, where my choices didn't matter unless they aligned with hers. The kettle clicked behind me, startling the silence. I hadn't even turned it on. Maybe that was the moment. I truly understood that the jewelry wasn't what she wanted. Control was. I didn't plan on rereading my wife's will that night. I only opened the drawer because I couldn't sleep. When I look back now, that was the moment I realized Lily had seen further ahead than any of us. The house was dim, lit only by the table lamp in the hallway, a warm, amber glow that made the rooms look smaller, safer. I stood there for a long time, barefoot on the wooden floor, listening to the refrigerator hum and the soft creaks of the settling house. Grief has a way of waking you up at hours when even the night feels tired. I don't know why I reached for the bottom drawer of Lily's desk. Maybe I wanted to feel close to her. Maybe I needed to hear her voice in the one way that still existed, through her handwriting, her instructions, her careful planning, or maybe deep down. I already knew something was off with Claire's urgency. The will was exactly where we left it 2 years ago, sealed in a yellow folder with Lily's neat label, estate and personal items final. Her handwriting was always calm, elegant, and strangely certain. I carried the folder to the dining table and sat under the soft light, the pages whispering as I opened them. It took only a few lines, for something tightened in my chest. Lily had written a specific clause, clear, direct and highlighted by her own hand. All personal belonging items shall remain at Michael's discretion. He may gift them as he sees fit, without obligation or expectation toward any individual. Without obligation? Without expectation. Lily had always chosen her words carefully. That phrase wasn't an accident. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of her intentions sink in. The will wasn't complicated, but the clarity of that clause created a quiet kind of protection, one Claire had either overlooked or never cared to ask about. She never once mentioned the will. Not even after the funeral. She had simply assumed possession would be automatic. Lily had known better. I traced the highlighted sentence with my finger. Even in ink, Lily still had a way of steadying me as I reread the page. Memories surfaced. Lily, sitting at this very table, sipping tea, saying we can't control what people want from us, but we can control what we leave behind. I understood her then, but only in theory. Tonight, I understood her in truth. The room felt both fuller and emptier at the same time. I closed the folder gently, but before I could stand, the front door opened. Claire walked in without knocking again. She always used to knock. Even when she lived here, she would knock on my study door before entering. Now, she walked in like the house belonged to her. "Dad," she said, catching her breath. "I've been calling." My phone was still on silent from the clinic that morning. I hadn't checked it. She stepped closer, eyes narrowing when she saw the folder on the table. "What's that?" I kept my tone neutral. "Your mother's will." Something flickered in her expression, surprise, then suspicion. "Why are you reading that now?" "Because it's something I should have paid more attention to," I replied. She crossed her arms. "I don't see why that matters. We already know how everything should go. For use of we didn't escape me. It matters," I said calmly, "because your mother made her wishes very clear." Claire's brow tensed. "Dad, you're getting overwhelmed. This isn't the time to complicate things." She reached toward the folder, but I gently slid it away. "I'm not overwhelmed," I said softly. "I'm informed." Her jaw tightened, not visibly, but in that small, controlled way she used to keep from appearing emotional. She took a slow breath, then exhaled through her nose. "What does it say?" she asked, the calm tone finally cracking. "Exactly what your mother intended," I answered, "that the personal items are for me to decide." She looked at me for a long moment, too long, her eyes calculating the risk, the loss, the shift in power. I just want what's fair, she said quietly. Fairness. In her voice sounded like a negotiation. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I simply closed the folder, placed it back into its envelope, and rested my hands gently on it. Your mother trusted me, I said, and I intend to honor that. Claire looked toward the living room, toward the hallway.
Or at the drawer she had searched earlier in the week when she thought I didn't notice.
The urge to control was still in her posture, still in her breath, but something else appeared too: fear. Not of losing jewelry, of losing the narrative. I'm just trying to help, she whispered. But help wasn't what she wanted when she left. The house felt heavier than before, as if the walls themselves were trying to absorb the tension she carried out with her. I placed Lily's will gently back into the drawer. Her highlighted words lingered in my mind like a compass pointing toward a truth I hadn't yet fully understood. I didn't expect a single envelope to feel heavier than the jewelry box itself. But when I held it, my hands shook in a way I hadn't felt since the day Lily passed. I met with my lawyer, Grace Miller, earlier that morning. She had always been patient, calm, in a way only someone who had seen countless families unravel could be. Her office was quiet, the smell of coffee lingering in the air, the blinds half open to let in a soft morning light. She sat across from me, reviewing a few documents. When she paused, "There's one more thing," she said. Her voice had shifted gentler. Almost cautious, she reached into a locked drawer and pulled out a small white envelope, sealed with a thin strip of gold adhesive. My name was written on the front, in Lily's handwriting. I recognized the curve of every letter. The way she always angled the M, the way her pen pressed a little too hard on the downstroke of the W. I stared at it for a long moment, unable to move. She wanted you to have this privately, Grace said. Only when the time felt right. The time didn't feel right. It felt terrifying. I carried the envelope home like it was something fragile, like it might shatter if I breathed too deeply. I placed it on the dining table, beside the same lamp that had illuminated Lily's will the night before. For nearly half an hour, I just sat there, staring at the envelope while the world outside continued with its usual indifference, cars passing, birds calling, the soft hum of the refrigerator, ordinary sounds that felt painfully mismatched with the weight of what waited inside that paper. When I finally picked it up, the envelope felt warm, as if Lily's hands had been the last to hold it then, as if timed by something unseen. I heard the front door open. Claire walked in without hesitation, her eyes sweeping across the room until they landed on the envelope. "What's that?" she asked immediately. Her voice held the sharpness of someone trying to stay casual, but failing. "A letter from your mother," said Claire, stepped forward too quickly. "I should read it too." "No," I replied. "It's addressed to me." She took a breath, slow, controlled. "Dad, please don't make this complicated. Whatever Mom wrote, we deserve to know." We, the same word she had used the night before, as if Lily had trusted her the same way she trusted me. I moved the envelope toward me instinctively. A small motion, but enough for Claire to understand she wouldn't be part of the moment. Her expression tightened, resentment flickering behind her eyes. "Fine," she said. "If that's how you want to handle things." She turned away, drifting into the living room. But she didn't leave. She lingered close enough to hear the sound of paper tearing. I held the envelope for a few seconds, grounding myself with a deep breath. Then I slid a finger under the seal and opened it. The paper inside was a single sheet, cream-colored, slightly textured, folded neatly into thirds. I unfolded it slowly, afraid that rushing would feel disrespectful. The first line stole the oxygen from my lungs. "Michael, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there to steady you." Her handwriting was soft, fluid, gentler than the bold notes she'd written in her will. As if she had written this with her heart instead of her caution. She wrote about love, memory, and trust. About how she feared I would carry everything alone after she was gone. She wrote about Claire, kind words, hopeful words, but with a sadness woven between the lines. And then, a name, Hannah. My breath stilled. "There is a young woman who once helped me when you didn't know. Someone who showed kindness without expecting anything in return. Kindness you should remember, especially when others around you begin to calculate. I closed my eyes for a moment, the weight of recognition settling in. Hannah, the nurse, who had sensed more in 15 minutes than Claire had in months. I kept reading. Who we trust is not decided by blood, but by behavior. Keep your eyes open, my love. Her words echoed so deeply it hurt. Behind me, I heard Claire shift her weight, pretending to tidy something on the shelf. But the silence between us was loud, too loud for her not to sense something had changed. I folded the letter gently, the edges trembling between my fingers. I slipped it back into the envelope and held it close. As if Lily's voice were still alive inside it, Claire turned toward me, her expression firm. What did she say? I met her eyes, calm and steady. Exactly what she needed to. Aid. Her jaw tightened, just slightly, but enough to tell me she understood she had lost some invisible ground she never imagined. She was standing on when she finally left the house. The envelope still rested under my palm, warm from my touch, and as the door clicked shut behind her, I realized that Lily had planted a warning I had ignored for too long. I didn't expect Lily's handwriting to shake me twice in 1 week. But when I read the last lines of her letter, everything I thought I understood about Claire shifted. The morning was cool, almost gentle. The kind of morning Lily used to say felt polite. I sat at the dining table with a cup of tea that had gone cold without my noticing. The letter lay open in front of Mitha, cream paper slightly curled at the edges, the ink still sharp in its confidence. I'd read it twice at the lawyer's office. But reading something privately, in your own home, is different. It hits deeper. More honestly, I started again from the beginning, Michael. If you're reading this, I'm trusting your judgment more than ever. Lily never told me what to do. She nudged gently, the way someone lights a hallway without forcing you to walk it. But this letter was more than a nudge. It was a warning wrapped in tenderness. She wrote about love, about the way she hoped Claire would grow into her empathy instead of her impatience. She wrote about memories, small ones, the ones we usually lose. The morning we fixed the broken porch light together. The afternoon she taught Claire how to fold laundry without making it look like an apology. Then the tone shifted. People change under pressure. Sometimes for the better, sometimes not. My fingers tightened on the page. There was a Nurse Hannah. She helped me on a day when I couldn't breathe well. She was respectful, steady, and she saw me as a person, not a problem. I felt the warmth of recognition. The Hannah from the clinic. The one who noticed stress before I admitted it existed. The one Lily had encountered years earlier, and then Lily wrote something that made my throat tighten. Kindness is a form of inheritance too. And sometimes it's the most valuable part. I sat back, letting the words settle. They didn't feel like instructions. They felt like Lily leaving me a compass when she hoped I would follow when things became difficult, and things were becoming difficult, just as I folded the letter carefully. As if it were made of something more fragile than paper, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Light but purposeful. Claire, she walked into the dining room with a polite smile. Too polite. Her eyes immediately found the envelope on the table. Oh, she said. Still reading that? I didn't answer her tone. I didn't rise to the subtle pressure behind it. I simply nodded. It's personal, I said. She moved closer. Dad, I just think we should all know what Mom wanted. It affects the family. Family. The word caught in the air like dust in sunlight. Visible, suspended, misunderstood. I placed the envelope back into its folder. Your mother trusted me with this. Claire's jaw clenched so slightly that only a parent would notice. Well, she said, forcing a lighter tone. I hope it doesn't complicate things. Complicate things. Meaning, complicate her plans. She walked around the room, pretending to straighten cushions and examine frames that had hung untouched for years. Her movements held an unease she hadn't yet learned to hide. Then she turned sharply. Did Mom mention? The jewelry? There it was. The real question. The one she had been circling for days. I kept my voice calm. She mentioned trust. Claire blinked. Once, twice. Her lips parted slightly, as if she expected more detail. But when none came, She filled the silence herself. "I just want to help you," she insisted. "You shouldn't have to handle everything alone." Her voice carried the same cadence as the appraisal form she forgot, same cadence as the call log from the insurance company, the same cadence as Ethan's text asking, "Did he say yes?" I folded the letter again slowly, intentionally, and her eyes followed every movement. Then came her breaking point. "You're seriously choosing strangers over your own daughter?" Her voice wavered, not loud, but sharp in a way that cut more deeply because she kept it quiet. I looked at her for a long moment, long enough for her to feel the weight of what she said. "I'm choosing what your mother trusted," I answered. Nothing more. A silence settled between us, long, heavy, almost brittle. Claire turned toward the hallway, arms crossed. "I hope you don't regret this," she whispered. She left the house before I could reply. I watched her walk down the driveway with a stiffness in her steps, as if she had to keep herself from looking back. When the door finally closed, I set Lily's letter on the table and traced the underlined sentence again. "Not everyone who carries our last name carries our values." The room felt still, honest, uncomfortably clear. Lily hadn't just written a farewell. She had given me a warning. I booked the appraisal quietly, hoping it would give me clarity. But sometimes clarity comes from who shows up, not what gets valued. When I look back, that afternoon told me more about Claire than any fight ever could. The appraisal office was nothing like I expected. Clean, bright, modern glass walls, white tiles, soft classical music playing overhead. It felt less like a place where jewelry was inspected, and more like a space where truth had nowhere to hide. I sat with the small wooden jewelry box resting on my lap, the same one Lily had guarded with gentle, almost reverent care. A woman in her 40s stepped into the lobby, wearing a navy blazer and carrying a digital tablet. Her smile was genuine in a way that relaxed the room. "Mr. Warren? I'm Julia Hart. Thank you for coming in." Her voice was warm, not mechanical. The kind of tone that made you feel like a person, not a transaction. I followed her into a private evaluation room. White table, soft lights, a velvet mat laid out for the items. Julia asked if I preferred to discuss the sentimental value or simply the material details. "Both," I said. "But let's start with facts." Facts, after all, don't shift when someone wants them to. I opened the jewelry box. Julia inspected each piece, carefully, gloves on, magnifier raised, taking small, respectful pauses. She didn't rush. She treated the items as if they carried stories, not just price tags. "This brooch," she said, "is older than it looks. Victorian design. Very well kept." "Her mother's," I murmured. Julia nodded with quiet respect. She worked in calm silence, entering notes on her tablet, the soft clicking of the stylus, the only sound in the room. Until the door opened without warning, Claire walked in. Not a knock, not a question, just entered. "Oh, good," she said, breath slightly quickened. "I made it." Julia looked between us with polite confusion. "Do we know each other?" "I'm his daughter," Claire said quickly, stepping forward like she had an appointment too. "I'm here to help with decisions." Her voice wasn't rude. It wasn't aggressive. It was territorial. I kept my posture relaxed, though a quiet dread began settling in my stomach. "Dad," she said, smiling tightly, "you should have told me you were coming." "I didn't think it required company," I replied. The tension that moment created, small, sharp, invisible to outsiders, was the kind of tension that builds slowly. The way cold spreads through a room. Claire stepped beside Julia. "So, what are we looking at? Ballpark number?" Julia straightened, professionalism returning to her posture. "We're still in the evaluation phase. The report will be finalized after review." Claire nodded impatiently. Sure. "I just want to be informed," she meant. "I want control." For a few minutes, Claire hovered, leaning too close, asking questions that sounded like statements, pretending the pieces meant something to her beyond their appraised significance. Finally, Julia excused herself to print the preliminary certificate. The moment the door clicked shut, Claire turned to me. You really thought doing this alone was a good idea? I didn't think it required a team, I answered calmly. Her eyes hardened, not dramatically. Just enough to reveal the frustration beneath her carefully constructed calm. You're making this difficult, she whispered. Mom wouldn't want complications. I studied her face. Complications? I asked softly. Or boundaries? Before she could respond, the door opened. Julia returned, carrying a crisp, glossy sheet. She placed it gently on the table. This is the formal appraisal certificate, she said. Final review will confirm these values, but this is accurate. Claire's eyes darted immediately to the bottom of the page, where the total estimated worth sat, neatly printed in bold. A breath escaped her, not shock, not admiration. Something closer to calculation, Julia continued, unaware of the quiet shift in the room. Mr. Warren, you are the sole legal owner. All decisions are entirely yours. Claire's jaw tightened at the word sole. Julia shook my hand with warm sincerity. If you need further documentation, just call. Claire didn't look at Julia. She didn't look at me. She just stared at the number on the certificate, her fingers twitching slightly as if resisting the urge to grab it. As we walked outside, she finally spoke. Dad, please don't drag this out. It's better to finalize things sooner rather than later. Finalize things. Not honor, not memory, not Lily. Finalize her words followed me home, hanging in the air like a thin, cold fog. And even before I set the appraisal certificate down on my desk, I could sense that this wasn't just about jewelry anymore. It was about what she believed she was owed. Only called the insurance company to update a routine detail. But the moment the agent pulled up my account, I felt something inside me shift quietly, like a chair being moved in another room. The afternoon light was dim, the kind of overcast tone that made the house feel smaller than usual. I sat at my desk, the appraisal certificate still resting where I'd left it, its glossy surface reflecting the gray sky through the window. I dialed the number printed at the bottom. Heritage. Insurance company Lily picked, because she said their hold music was less depressing than the others. The call connected after a few rings. Thank you for calling Heritage Insurance. This is Megan. How can I help you today? Her voice was warm, professional, rhythmic, someone who had handled enough sensitive calls to know when to soften her tone. I explained calmly. I'd like to update the belongings section of my homeowner's policy. A few items were appraised recently. She asked for my name, address, last four digits routine. I could hear her typing in the background, the faint clack of keys, then her voice hesitated. Mr. Warren, I see some recent changes on your account. Are you calling to confirm or revise those? I froze. Recent changes? I repeated. What changes? There was a pause, soft, uncomfortable. The kind customer service agents use when preparing to deliver a truth they didn't create. Earlier this week, she said, someone phoned in and attempted to update the high-value item section. They listed, jewelry pieces by description. My heartbeat slowed to a heavy, deliberate thud. Who called? I asked. The caller identified herself as your daughter, Claire. The room around me faded into a blur. Their desk, the certificate, the half-empty glass of water. Everything became distant except the voice on the line. Megan continued. The request wasn't completed because we needed your personal authorization. But she insisted she had your approval and said you were too stressed to call. Personally, too stressed. Those were Claire's exact words at the appraisal office. She had rehearsed them. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the muted reflection of myself in the window, older, tired, but no longer confused. Megan, I said carefully, I didn't authorize any changes, and I didn't ask my daughter to call. Understood, she replied. I'll mark this as an unauthorized attempt. For your records, I can email you the call log summary. Yes, I said. Please do. The email arrived before we ended the call. A PDF attachment. Time-stamped, detailed, clear. I thanked her, hung up, and opened the document. There it was. Caller Claire. Warrant date. 3:27 p.m. Reason. Add delete high-value jewelry. Items. Outcome. Denied missing primary authorization notes. Caller insisted father approved, but was unavailable due to mental strain. Mental strain. She had described me as if I were incapable. The kettle clicked softly in the kitchen, one of those mundane sounds that suddenly felt jarring. I stood up slowly, the PDF still open on the screen. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel betrayed. I felt awakened. Claire's urgency wasn't emotional. It was strategic. And for the first time, I saw the shape of something larger, something she and Ethan had been discussing behind the scenes. A timeline. A plan. I walked into the living room, trying to steady my breathing. The house felt colder, not physically, emotionally. The kind of cold that comes when trust slips from your hands and hits the floor without making a sound. I looked out the window, just in time to see a familiar car pulling into the driveway. Claire. She stepped out, brushing her hair behind her ear, walking with a rehearsed confidence that didn't match the storm forming inside me. She walked in without knocking again. "Dad," she called. I was in the neighborhood. Oh, she wasn't. Her timing was too precise to be coincidence. She saw the screen, saw the email, saw the PDF. Her smile faltered barely, but enough. "What's that?" she asked. "Insurance update," I said evenly. She moved closer. "Oh, right. I was going to help you with that. You already tried," I answered quietly. "Without me." The air between us tightened like a drawn bowstring. She swallowed. "Dad, I told them you were stressed so they'd understand why you couldn't call. I was trying to make it easier." "Easier for whom?" She reached out, placing a hand on my arm. "You know I'm only trying to protect what matters." Her words were soft. Her grip was firm. Her intentions were transparent. I pulled my arm away gently, not in anger, but clarity. "A boundary forming? I can handle my affairs," I said. "And your mother trusted me too." Something dark flickered behind her eyes. Fear. Frustration, maybe even panic. Before she could speak, my phone buzzed. A message from the insurance agent. "Unauthorized attempt flagged. Your account is now locked to outside callers." Claire saw the preview. Her expression hardened. She didn't say goodbye when she left. She simply walked out, closing the door quietly, and in that quiet, I realized something. Her next move wouldn't be a phone call. It would be something closer to home. I never feared anesthesia. I feared waking up to the wrong faces. When I look back, that morning showed me exactly who wanted to stand beside me and who wanted to stand over me. The clinic hallways were colder than usual. That sharp hospital chill that makes your fingertips feel smaller. I checked in early, a few minutes before the first wave of appointments. It was a simple outpatient procedure routine, nothing complicated. But Claire insisted on driving me. She arrived looking polished, purposeful, and strangely alert for someone who claimed to have barely slept. She kept asking if I was nervous. I wasn't, but she asked with the tone of someone who wanted me to be. When we entered the waiting area, she guided me to a chair as if she were my guardian. "We'll handle everything today," she said softly, with the same word she always used when she meant herself and Ethan. She sat beside me, clasping her hands, pretending patience. But her eyes kept shifting toward the administrative desk, toward the forms, toward the paperwork she wished she could sign for me. A nurse called my name. "Mr. Warren, you'll be with me?" I stood slowly, expecting Claire to follow. But the nurse raised her hand gently. "Family can wait here until after recovery." Claire didn't like that. I saw it in her jaw. Inside the exam area, the fluorescent lights felt brighter, almost intrusive. The nurse led me through the preliminary steps, and that's when I heard a familiar voice behind me, soft, steady, unmistakable. "Mr. Warren, I'm assigned to your room today, Hannah." She stepped forward in her light blue scrubs, her hair tied back neatly. The sight of her eased something inside me I didn't know was tight. "I didn't know you worked mornings," I said. "I switched shifts," she answered quietly. "Thought I'd be more helpful today." Her words held no agenda, just sincerity, something I hadn't felt from my own daughter in weeks. As she guided me to the prep room, she checked my wristband, adjusted the strap, and placed a warm hand briefly on my shoulder. "You're in safe hands," she said. And I believed her, while the doctor prepared the anesthesia. Hannah took my things wallet, watch. Kizan placed them carefully into a small zippered pouch. She labeled it meticulously, handwriting clear. "Michael Warren, room 3A. Anything else you need me to keep safe?" she asked. I shook my head, but she sensed the unspoken weight in my silence. Before the sedative reached my bloodstream, she leaned closer and whispered, "I'll stay until you wake up." That sentence simple, undramatic, felt gentler than anything Claire had said in months. The procedure itself blurred into white noise, adrift through weightless darkness. When I opened my eyes again, the world returned slowly, the monitor beeping, the soft overhead light, and Hannah sitting in a chair beside my bed, reading something on her clipboard. She noticed me stirring and stood immediately. "There you are," she said, smiling. "Everything went perfectly." Her voice steadied my thoughts like a hand smoothing out a wrinkled sheet. I glanced around. "Is Claire here?" Hannah nodded, but her expression softened into something apologetic. "She left for a bit. Said she had to take a call." Take a call. From who? I didn't have to guess. Hannah brought me water, supported my arm as I sat up, and stayed close until the doctor cleared me for discharge. Before she left the room, she reached into her pocket. "This is yours," she said, holding the patient wristband. "People usually throw these away, but sometimes it's good to remember who was actually there for you." I took it gently. The plastic band was warm from her hands. Claire returned moments later. Cheerful but too bright, the kind of brightness that hides something sharp behind it. She picked up my coat, straightened my collar, and reached for my keys. "I'll hold on to these," she said. "Just for today. Easier that way." But the pouch meticulously labeled by Hannah was still in my lap. "I have them," I said. Her smile faltered just half an inch. "But enough, oh. I must have imagined you handing them to me earlier. Imagined or expected." On the drive home, she talked quickly about traffic, dinner, her week, anything to stretch the silence. But all I could think about was the warmth of the wristband in my pocket and the coldness of her sudden insistence. When we reached the house, Claire lingered on the porch, as if waiting for permission to come in. "Get some rest," she said. "I'll check in later." She didn't wait for my response, and as I stepped inside, I felt something was different, subtle, wrong. The air had been disturbed. The drawer slightly ajar. A faint scent of her perfume in the hallway. Claire had been here while I was unconscious. I didn't misplace my keys. I misplaced my trust. When I look back now, that was the day I realized some doors don't get opened accidentally. The house felt strange when I walked in, like someone had moved the air around. Nothing obvious. Nothing dramatic. Just wrong. The way wrong feels when you sense it before you see it. I took off my coat and reached automatically for the small ceramic plate where I always put my keys. It was empty. I checked my pockets, my jacket. The pouch Hannah had labeled with her careful handwriting, "No keys." A quiet tightening spread across my chest. But I forced myself to stay calm. Hospital grogginess, anesthesia lingering maybe. That was all it was. Maybe I'd dropped them. Maybe they slipped under the car seat. Maybe the front door clicked behind. Claire. She stepped inside with the same gentle smile she liked to use when she was trying to soften a hard landing. "Dad?" she said lightly. "Did you get home okay?" "I drove home," I replied. "Yes." She nodded, brushing invisible dust from her sleeve. "That's good. I was worried you'd be too drowsy to handle it," she said, worried, but she meant watching. I walked to the kitchen, opening drawers one by one. Claire followed, her eyes tracking my movements. "Lose something?" she asked. "My keys?" I said. She paused half a second too long. "Oh, didn't you give them to me before the procedure?" I looked at her carefully. "No," I said. "I didn't." She blinked, masking surprise with practiced ease. "Really?" "I could have sworn, well, maybe you were just groggy." She wanted me to doubt myself. She wanted the anesthesia to be the explanation. But I remembered the moment, clearly Hannah, placing the pouch in my lap. The wristband. The careful handwriting. My keys were there. And then they weren't. "I'll help you look," Claire offered. She didn't mean help. She meant direct. She checked the couch cushions, the coat hooks, the coffee table, all theatrics. A performance she knew I was watching. After several minutes, she sighed dramatically. "Well, maybe they'll turn up later. You get some rest." Rest. Another word she used when she wanted me distracted. Claire left a few minutes later, closing the door with a softness meant to seem considerate. Instead, it felt calculated, like she didn't want to disturb whatever plan she thought she'd successfully set in motion. I walked through the house again, slowly this time. My study. The bedroom. Lily's dresser. Nothing was obviously disturbed, but the sense of intrusion clung to every corner. My phone buzzed. A message from Tom, my neighbor. "Package delivered to your porch earlier. Thought you were home, so I left it. Just letting you know." I frowned. There was no package on the porch when I arrived. I called him. "Tom, what time was the delivery?" He checked his phone. Let me look. 10:42 a.m. Dropped it right at your door." "That was during my procedure. And you're sure you left it on my porch?" "Positive," he said. "You even had someone let themselves in. A woman thought it was your daughter." My pulse slowed. Not fast. Slowed cold. I walked to the porch and checked again. Nothing. No box, no envelope. "Tom," I asked, "do you still have the confirmation photo from your security system?" "Yeah," he said. "Want me to send it?" "Yes." A moment later, the image appeared, a delivery driver placing a small brown package on my porch at 10:42, timestamp in the upper corner. A person's silhouette opened the door moments later. Quick. Almost impatient, the figure was unmistakably Claire. The package was in her hands, and she stepped inside without my permission, without my keys, unless she took them earlier. I stared at the photo until the edges blurred. Then another message from Tom. "I didn't want to assume anything. Just thought you should know. Thought I should know. Did the keys hadn't disappeared, they had been lifted, taken while I was unconscious. Claimed. Under the excuse of helping, and if she took my keys, then she took something else too." I walked slowly to the bedroom, to the dresser where Lily's jewelry box usually sits, absence whispering louder than any argument. My hand hovered above the empty space. So, this was her next move. Not persuasion, not pressure. Access. She wanted inside my drawers. Inside my things. Inside the parts of my life Lily trusted me to protect. I picked up my phone and saved the timestamp photo into a new folder labeled Evidence.
Ow.
Out of anger, out of clarity, out of understanding, out of preparation. Because Claire wasn't just visiting anymore. She was entering. I've misplaced things before: wallets, glasses, even my temper. But I've never misplaced conviction. And when I opened the drawer that morning, I knew instantly that what was missing wasn't an item. It was trust. The light in the bedroom was thin, tracing faint lines across the dresser. The kind of light that reveals dust but hides intentions. I reached for the top drawer where Lily's jewelry box always sat in right corner, never left. She liked things consistent, predictable, and even after she was gone, I kept it exactly where she would have wanted it. But the space was empty, not disturbed, not crooked, not shifted. Empty. My hand hovered over the wood, fingertips grazing the faint outline where the box had rested for years. The absence felt physical, like stepping onto a stair that wasn't there. I scanned the room, closets, shelves, under the bed. I searched with a calm I didn't feel, because panic wouldn't bring it back. Logic might. When I walked into the hallway, I saw Claire coming from the kitchen. She was texting someone, her expression alert, as if she were waiting for a cue. "Morning," she said too brightly. "You're up early." "I'm looking for something," I said. She slid her phone into her pocket. "What is it?" "My jewelry box." Her eyebrows lifted with rehearsed confusion. "The one with Mom's things?" Maybe you moved it. I didn't. She crossed her arms lightly. Dad, anesthesia can make your memory foggy. You were exhausted yesterday. Maybe you put it somewhere without thinking. There it was again, her favorite narrative. That I was slipping. That she needed to step in. I opened the living room. Drawer, nothing. Checked the study. Cabinet, nothing. Walked back to the bedroom. Still nothing. Claire followed at a careful distance, pretending to be helpful but scanning each room like she was verifying something rather than discovering it. Maybe it fell, she suggested. Boxes don't fall upward. I said. A flicker crossed her face, a tiny break in her composure. She recovered quickly, but I saw it. Fear of exposure is difficult to hide. I'm sure it'll turn up, she said, shrugging. Things don't disappear. Things do disappear when someone removes them. And the person pretending to help search was the person who had already been inside the house before. I came home. My phone buzzed. A message from lawyer Grace. Everything all right? Need to talk? I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I stepped outside for air. The morning breeze was cool, the street quiet, except for Tom sweeping leaves in his driveway. You okay? He called. I walked over. Did you see anyone come to the house yesterday evening? After the package? Tom hesitated. His broom stopped moving. I don't want to get involved in family things, he said carefully. But, yes. She came back. My stomach tightened. Claire? He nodded. With her car parked half a block down, she walked over quickly, looked around before coming up your porch. He looked at me a long moment. Something happened? I exhaled slowly. Something's missing. Tom's face hardened with concern. I knew something felt off. Here, take this. He pulled up another security clip on his phone, just audio. Faint but clear enough. Timestamp. 7:56 p.m. Claire's voice. Shaky but determined. I'll handle it. He won't check before tomorrow anyway. Then silence. Cold. Deliberate silence. When I got back inside, Claire was standing near the hallway mirror, pretending to straighten it. She looked up quickly as if she sensed a shift in the air. Find it? She asked. No, I said. But I'm documenting it. She frowned. Documenting what? I didn't answer. I picked up my keys, my phone, and the folder containing Lily's will and the appraisal certificate. Then I walked past Claire, calm and steady. Where are you going? She asked, her voice tightening. To speak with someone who knows what missing things mean, I said. She didn't follow. At Grace's office? The conversation was short. Grace listened without interrupting, her expression composed. When I finished, she sighed and pulled out a form. A missing property report, she said. This doesn't accuse anyone. It just documents the loss officially. If items reappear, we'll know the timeline. If they don't, we'll have a record. She slid it toward me. I signed it. Then she signed beneath my name, her signature, sharp and decisive. The weight of the paper felt heavier than it should have. Not because of the value of what was missing, but because of who was missing from the truth. When I returned home, Claire's car was still in the driveway. She was sitting inside, pretending to nap. Her sunglasses hid her eyes. But her breathing was too quick for sleep. And that's when I noticed something. The back seat, a familiar shape. Beneath the cloth, I didn't open the door. Didn't confront her, not yet. But as I walked toward the house, the truth settled in quietly. The jewelry wasn't lost. It had been taken. I never wanted cameras in my house. But sometimes the only way to hear the truth is to let the walls listen for you. When I looked back, installing them was the moment I stopped hoping Claire would stop, and started preparing for when she wouldn't. The house was still, the kind of stillness that follows a sleepless night. After filing the missing property report, the air felt different, charged, almost waiting. I walked to the hardware store just after sunrise, bought 2 small indoor cameras, and drove home without turning on the radio. Silence was easier. Setting them up felt strangely intimate, pointing little unblinking eyes at the parts of the house where trust had already cracked. One in the hallway, angled toward the bedrooms. one in the living room, facing the shelves and drawer. Claire kept helping me reorganize. I placed the jewelry box exactly where it had always been, right corner of the dresser, because I needed to see what would happen when the opportunity returned. Not if, when. By noon, the cameras were active, quiet, invisible. Streaming to a private folder on my laptop, I tested them with a simple gesture, raising my hand slowly. The footage saved instantly. A timestamp marking the moment, 12:07 p.m. recording started. I stared at it longer than I should have, because once a camera begins telling the truth, it rarely stops. Around 3 in the afternoon, Claire texted, "I'm coming by. We need to talk about yesterday." Not "can I come by?" Not "is this a good time?" Just, "I'm coming." I didn't reply. 10 minutes later, a car pulled into the driveway. She walked up the porch steps, paused for a moment, straightening her clothes, steadying her breath, and then unlocked the door with the confidence of someone who believed she still owned the narrative. "Dad," she called. "Are you home?" I stayed in my study, the door half open, the camera feed open on my laptop. Claire walked in with a softness that didn't match her steps. She wore concern on her face, but her eyes were scanning the hallway. "Dad," she repeated louder. Her gaze stopped at the dresser at the jewelry box, exactly where I wanted it. She exhaled relief mixed with impatience, stepped into the room. The camera caught everything. Claire walked directly to the box, hesitating only a second before lifting the lid. Her fingers moved with practiced familiarity, not searching, not exploring, confirming. She took out the emerald brooch first, holding it toward the light, then the pearl earrings, then the silver chain. Her phone buzzed. She answered in a whisper. "I'm doing it now," she said. The words felt like a thread snapping inside me. She didn't sound conflicted. She didn't sound pressured. She sounded a line part of a plan. She placed the jewelry into a small cloth bag she had brought in her jacket pocket. She moved quickly, efficiently, practiced. When the bag was full, she closed the jewelry box gently, as if careful not to disturb a sleeping memory, and turned to leave. Then she saw it. The hallway. Camera. A tiny blinking light reflected. In her pupils. She froze. Her expression didn't twist into guilt or fear. "No," she smiled. A small, unsettling smile, like someone who believes they're still 2 moves ahead. She walked closer to the camera, leaned in slightly, and tucked her hair behind her ear. "Dad," she said softly, as if speaking to the lens itself, "we're just trying to help you." Then she turned off the hallway light, as if closing a curtain. But cameras don't need light to remember. I watched everything in real time from my study, my hands cold on the laptop edges. For a long moment after she walked out, I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't blink, because there are truths you expect, in truths you hope you're wrong about. This one hurt more because of how calmly she did it. After she left, I saved the recording into a locked folder on my computer, labeling it quietly, 14 to 3:42 p.m. to Claire. The timestamp glowed on the screen, permanent, precise, undeniable. I sat back in my chair, staring at the footage one more time, not because I needed proof I already knew I watched, because I needed to understand the kind of person my daughter had become. And nothing prepares you for that kind of clarity. When the house was quiet again, I walked to the dresser, opened the jewelry box, and touched the empty space where Lily's brooch used to rest. I whispered, "I'm sorry, though. I didn't know if it was to Lily or to myself," because the next step wasn't about catching Claire. It was about protecting what Lily trusted me with. I didn't think giving something away would feel heavier than losing it. But that afternoon, sitting at a small cafe with a quiet decision in front of me, I realized not all weight comes from what you keep. The cafe was one of those places that tried not to be noticed. Soft lighting, worn wooden tables, the faint smell of roasted coffee and old books. It sat on the corner of a side street, tucked just far enough from the main road that you had to know it was there. Lily loved places like that. She used to say the world's most important conversations never happened in loud restaurants. I chose a table by the window, where late afternoon light slanted in at a forgiving angle. Outside, people moved with the kind of indifferent urgency that made me feel oddly invisible. Inside, the quiet felt deliberate. Safe. Hannah arrived a few minutes later, still in her scrubs, a light jacket thrown over them. She carried the kind of tiredness that comes from caring about people for a living, not just from working around them. "Mr. Warren," she said, a little out of breath. "Sorry I'm late. There was some paperwork at the clinic." Paperwork. Everything in my life seemed to come back to paper lately. "You're right on time," I said. She sat down, placed her phone face down on the table, and gave me her full attention. Not many people do that anymore. Put their phone away without being asked. It felt respectful. "You sounded serious on the phone," she said quietly. "Is everything all right?" I looked at her for a moment before answering. I thought of Lily's letter, of the line where she mentioned a young nurse who had once helped her when you didn't know. Thought of the way Hannah had stayed with me the entire time in recovery, while my own daughter stepped away to take calls. "I need your honesty," I said. "And I need your silence. Can you give me both?" Hannah straightened slightly. "Yes," she replied, without hesitation. I reached down and carefully lifted the small, padded box from my bag. Not the wooden jewelry chest, just one piece from it, wrapped in a dark cloth. I set it on the table between us. "This," I said, "belonged to my wife." Hannah's eyes dropped to the box. She didn't reach for it. She waited, as if touching it without permission would be a kind of trespassing what I'm about to say. I continued, "May sound strange, but I need you to hear it calmly." I told her everything, not in a dramatic rush, not with bitterness, just in order. Like a report, the appraisal appointment, the unauthorized call to the insurance company, the missing keys, the timestamp on Tom's camera, the jewelry that had been moved, taken, replaced, taken again, the recording from the hallway, camera Claire's hand, Claire's voice, Claire's quiet smile into the lens, and finally, Lily's letter, her mention of Hannah, her warning about people who carry our name, coded not our values. Hannah listened without interrupting. Her expression shifted only in small, controlled ways, a tightening around the eyes. A slow exhale, a soft frown when I described the call log from the insurance company. When I finished, I unwrapped the cloth and opened the small box inside. The emerald brooch caught the light from the window. "The green stone looked almost alive," Lily always said. It reminded her of the first. Trees in spring. Hannah's hand came up to her mouth. "Not out of greed, out of recognition that this meant something. You're not thinking of giving this to me?" she said slowly. "Yes," I answered. "I am." She shook her head immediately. "I can't accept that. You're not just anything," I interrupted softly. "You were kind to my wife when there was nothing in it for you. You were kind to me when my own family started treating me like a signature instead of a person." Her eyes glistened, but her voice stayed steady. "Mr. Warren, I'm a nurse. I looked after her because that was my job." "Plenty of people do their job," I said. "You cared. There's a difference." Silence settled between us, warm and fragile. Then I placed another item on the Tabola document folder. Inside it, partially visible, was a form that Grace had prepared after our last meeting. A simple, straightforward declaration of intent, non-binding gift transfer, subject to final execution. "I spoke with my lawyer," I said. "She told me I am free to decide what happens with Lily's personal items. Your name was already in Lily's letter." Long before any of this happened, Hannah looked stunned. Not pleased, stunned. "Why me?" she whispered. "Because Lily trusted you," I said. "And now I do too." I slid the document toward her, not for her to sign, but so she could see it was real. The language was formal, detached, but somewhere in those typed lines lived a decision that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with principle. "I don't expect you to decide today," I said, "but I need you to understand something. This isn't charity. It's not weakness. This is me honoring the person my wife asked me to be, even if it costs me my daughter's approval. Hannah's eyes dropped to the paper. She scanned it slowly, then placed a trembling hand on the edge of the table. This will hurt her, she said quietly. It will reveal her, I replied. We sat there for a long moment, letting that truth settle finally. I picked up the pen Grace had tucked into the folder and signed my name on the line labeled, Donor. Michael Warren, intention confirmed. It wasn't the final transfer. Not yet, but it was a step. A line drawn, a direction chosen. I dated it. The ink looked almost too dark against the white paper. Hannah exhaled shakily. Are you sure? No, I said honestly, but I'm certain there's a difference. When we left the cafe, the sky had shifted, clouds gathering low, light thinning. I handed the small brooch box back to her, still wrapped in cloth. Keep it safe for now, I said. Not as yours. Not yet. As a promise. She nodded, cradling it gently with both hands, and as I watched her walk away, I knew that what came next would be louder, harsher, more public, because in the next chapter, I don't just confirm what the jewelry's worth. I didn't expect the final appraisal to feel like a line being drawn. But when Julia handed me that sealed envelope, I realized this wasn't about numbers anymore. It was about who believed they owned the future. The appraisal office was quieter than last time, dimmer, almost cautious. The overhead lights were softer, as if even the room knew something had shifted since my previous visit. I walked in with the jewelry box tucked under my arm, feeling its weight in a new way. Not as an object. As evidence, Julia greeted me with the same warm professionalism as before. Though her eyes scanned my face like she already suspected something had gone wrong, Mr. Warren, she said. I reviewed everything carefully. The final valuation is ready. Her tone carried a hint of seriousness, a warning hidden beneath courtesy. I sat across from her in the evaluation room. The velvet mat was already laid out, the magnifier and gloves neatly arranged. But she didn't reach for the jewelry. She reached for a sealed cream envelope with my name typed on the front. We don't usually seal these, she said. But I thought you might appreciate discretion. Discretion. A word with weight. I nodded, placing the envelope gently beside the box. Thank you. Before she could continue, the door swung open, Claire not even pretending to be surprised. Oh, good, she said breathlessly. I made it just in time. Julia blinked, caught in the awkwardness of a boundary being crossed. Do you two need privacy? No, Claire said quickly. This concerns family. Her tone was smooth, but her eyes flicked to the envelope, like a magnet she hadn't come to observe. She'd come to intercept. I kept my voice calm. This appointment was mine, and I'm here to support you, she insisted, stepping forward as if that settled the matter. Julia hesitated, then looked to me for confirmation. I didn't give it. Instead, I gestured for her to continue, staying focused on the work, not the interruption. Julia folded her hands neatly. The valuation reflects both market value and historic worth. I've authenticated the brooch, the wedding band, the silver chain, the pearls, everything. Claire's breathing grew shallow as Julia listed each item, as if hearing the inventory spoken aloud confirmed exactly what she wanted and the total. Claire asked. Julia smiled politely. This envelope is addressed to Mr. Warren. He'll review it personally. A small fissure appeared in Claire's expression, annoyance, covered quickly by a strained smile. Well, she said, Dad and I don't keep secrets. But the way her eyes darted to the envelope betrayed her. Julia ignored the comment. The values are higher than the preliminary estimate. Some items are significantly undervalued by online charts. Our special pieces. I felt a quiet ache in my chest. Lovely had loved them for their meaning. Not their price. Claire, however, wasn't thinking of meaning. Can we move forward with the transfer now? She asked. So we don't drag things out. Julia blinked. Transfer? These items belong to your father. Claire laughed softly, trying to mask the edge in her voice. Of course they do. I only mean organizing the process. Julia glanced at me again, this time with concern. I kept my tone steady. We're not transferring anything today. Claire stiffened. Dad, we've talked about this. You shouldn't complicate what Mom would have wanted. Her invocation of Lily was so misplaced it felt like a bruise being pressed. Your mother wanted my discretion, I said evenly. Julia subtly stepped back. Giving us space, Claire lowered her voice. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Then, she leaned in slightly. Ethan and I can't keep waiting. The words slipped out before she realized what she'd said, waiting, as if this were a transaction, as if I were a delay. Julia's brows lifted faintly. I exhaled slowly, letting the truth sharpen inside me. This isn't about waiting, I said quietly. This is about respect and clarity, and the fact that your mother trusted me, not you, with these decisions. Her jaw tensed. Her eyes narrowed. For a moment, polite daughter vanished. The strategist surfaced, but then she forced a small smile, trying to gather the pieces of her composure. Well, I guess we'll talk later then. She turned sharply and walked out, her steps too quick. It's controlled, not angry, not defeated. Planning, Julia placed a hand on the envelope. Mr. Warren, be careful. Greed rarely stops on its own. Her honesty was steadying. I took the envelope, feeling its weight. Not heavy, but decisive, like a truth sealed in paper. Thank you, I said. As I walked out, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the pavement. The envelope felt warm in my hand. The final numbers inside it waiting to expose the last illusion Claire had been clinging to. Because in the next chapter, she stops hinting. She attacks using a false legal threat to force my hand. I've received real legal letters before after Lily passed, after selling the house we lived in when Claire was little. But the one that arrived today didn't feel legal. It felt desperate. The envelope was waiting on my porch when I stepped outside to get the morning paper. No stamp, no postmark, no tracking, hand-delivered. The kind of envelope someone leaves when they don't want a trail. The kind of envelope someone leaves when they think fear is easier than conversation. It had my name typed neatly on the front. Michael Warren. Urgent. Urgent. Claire's favorite word when she wanted something done on her timeline. I brought it inside, sat at the dining table and opened it with the kitchen knife Lily used to slice peaches in summer. Inside was a 3-page letter printed on plain white paper. The header reading, Warren and Blake LLP, Family Asset Mediation Division only. I knew this firm. Or rather, I knew of this firm. Grace had worked with them once during a property dispute. Their letters didn't look like this. Their formatting wasn't this. Uneven. The margins were mismatched. The bold headers were inconsistent. The signature line was missing the attorney bar number, which was never omitted in real documents. This wasn't a legal letter. This was a threat wearing a cheap suit. The first paragraph was written in stiff, overly formal language. Someone had tried too hard. It has come to our attention that an unnecessary delay has occurred in the distribution of sentimental personal assets belonging to the late Mrs. Lily Warren. Unnecessary delay, I exhaled. Slowly, the next line was worse. To prevent future conflict and family distress. We hereby request that Mr. Michael Warren proceed with early allocation to avoid emotional burden on his immediate descendants. Claire's phrasing, she once used the exact words when she talked about protecting her future family. Then the legal recommendations followed, vague, generic, reading like they were pulled from a search engine rather than an attorney. Best practice suggests liquidating items of high emotional value to avoid familial friction. Lily would have laughed at this sentence. I didn't. I reached the last page. A blank signature line. No printed name. No credentials. Just authorized. Representative. Not even a name. The formatting was sloppy, the paper cheap, the tone familiar. This wasn't law. This was manipulation. Disguised as law, I placed the pages flat on the table just as my phone buzzed. A message from Grace. Did you receive anything strange? Call me. I called immediately. She answered on the first ring. Michael, please tell me you didn't sign anything, I said. But I think someone wants me to believe I should. Describe the letter. I did. Slowly. Precisely. Like I was giving a deposition. She sighed halfway through. That's not from Warren. And, Blake, their bar numbers are always included. Their formatting is standardized. Whoever wrote this didn't know how to mimic a real notice. It was confirmed. A fake dot. Grace spoke carefully, her voice steady. This isn't just a misstep. This is coercion. And very poor coercion at that. I rubbed my forehead. What do I do? Nothing, she said. Not yet. Bring it to my office. I'll document it. But Michael, this is escalation. Someone is trying to pressure you into compliance. Someone we both knew who, but neither of us said her name. When I hung up, I stared at the letter again, its corners curled slightly, like even the paper knew it was lying. The front door opened. Claire stepped in without knocking. As always, Anne carried herself with a calm she hadn't earned. Oh, she said, spotting the papers on the table. I see you got that notice. Is that notice? Not a notice. That notice. So she added brightly. Now that you know what the lawyers recommend, we can move forward. I looked up at her. Her posture was confident, her breath steady, her eyes unapologetically direct. She truly thought the letter would work. Claire, wait, I said gently. Did you send this? She didn't flinch. She didn't deny it. She simply smiled, a small, almost pitying smile. Dad, sometimes you need guidance. I'm trying to prevent issues. Guidance.control wearing perfume. She lifted the first page with 2 fingers. I know it looks intense, but it's for the best. Families fall apart over things like this. Families fall apart, I said quietly. When trust does. Her expression shifted just a flicker. But enough to show I'd stepped past her script, she folded the papers neatly and handed them back as if she were doing me a favor. Think about it. Ethan and I just want to help. Then she left, without waiting for an answer. When the door closed, the house felt colder not because she'd taken something, but because she'd tried to force something. I placed the letter in a folder marked evidence. Next. To the camera recording next. To the insurance call log. Next to the missing property report. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Anymore, it was an operation. I knew the meeting wouldn't end peacefully. But I didn't expect it to begin with everyone pretending nothing was wrong. When I look back now, that hour in Grace's office was the moment masks stopped fitting. The sky was overcast, flat, and gray. The kind of weather that made the day feel heavier. I parked outside Grace Miller's law office 20 minutes early, not because I was eager, but because I needed stillness before the storm. The lobby smelled faintly of paper and peppermint tea. Grace's assistant greeted me softly and guided me into the conference room, a quiet space with glass. Walls and shelves lined with legal books that looked too thick to ever be read. At the center of the table sat it. Binder thick, black, labeled in Grace's handwriting. Warren Estate Evidence, chronological. Seeing it made my stomach tighten. Every page inside that binder was a moment I hadn't wanted to memorialize but needed to. 5 minutes later, footsteps approached. Claire walked in first. She entered with a confidence that didn't match the tension in her eyes. She wore a soft blue blouse, her hair perfectly styled, her expression composed, the kind of composure people use when they believe the room is on their side. Right behind her came Ethan, hands in pockets, jaw tight, performing nonchalance but failing. He scanned the room quickly, as if checking for angles, exits, opportunities. Dad? Claire said lightly, taking the seat closest to me. Glad we're doing this together? It's doing. Not resolving. Grace entered last, holding another stack of papers against her chest. She gave me a small, steady nod before sitting at the head of the table. Thank you all for coming, she began. We're here to clarify recent events regarding Michael's personal property. Claire smiled politely. Yes, exactly. Just clarification. Grace opened the binder. Page 1. Missing property report signed. Claire's smile faltered barely, but enough for Grace to notice. Page 2. Insurance call log. An authorized attempt. Time-stamped. Documented. Ethan shifted in his chair. Page 3. Screenshot appraisal values. Claire had photographed weeks before. Claire looked down quickly. Page 4. Photo from Tom's security timestamp. Claire entering my house during my medical procedure. Her breath caught. Page 5. Camera recording transcript. Claire removing items from the jewelry box. Whispering, "I'm doing it now." The silence that followed was not quiet. It was thick, sharp, humiliating. For the first time since this began, Claire looked genuinely shaken. "Grace," she said, voice trembling slightly, "this is all taken out of context." "Please," Grace replied calmly. "Help us understand the correct context." Ethan leaned forward. "This is ridiculous. We were trying to help him organize his estate. He forgets things. He misplaces things. We were protecting the assets." I turned to him slowly. "You weren't protecting anything." He met my gaze, jaw clenching. "You're being manipulated by outsiders who don't understand what's best for you." Outsiders. A word aimed at Hannah without being spoken. Grace flipped to the next page. Chaptered summary of events. Claire's attempts to pressure early transfer. Fake legal letter mismatched formatting. She placed the fake letter at the center of the table, Claire. Grace said, "This letter is fraudulent. It was not written by Warren and Blake. This could constitute legal coercion." Claire's face drained of color. "I didn't write that." Someone must have." Ethan interrupted. "We were told that's how these things work. Early distribution avoids conflict." "We were following advice." "What advice?" Grace asked. Ethan's jaw tightened. He didn't answer. I spoke quietly. "I never asked for help managing my life. I never asked you to intervene. All I asked for was respect and patience." Claire swallowed hard, her eyes shining not with remorse, but fear. "Dad, we just didn't want you taken advantage of." Grace closed the binder with a soft but final thud. "Michael has full legal control," she said. "He does not need protection from imaginary threats. He needs his boundaries honored." Claire looked at me, then really looked, and for the first time, I saw something behind her expression that wasn't strategy. It was the realization that she wasn't winning. Grace stood. "Michael, if you're ready, we'll move to the next step." I nodded. She opened a separate folder. "This," she said, handing it to me, "is the documentation for your chosen recipient." Claire's voice cracked. "Chosen recipient." She looked around the room at Ethan, at the binder, at me. "You're giving Mom's jewelry to someone else?" I didn't answer her accusation. I simply said, "I'm honoring your mother's private wishes." Claire gripped the table. "To who?" The door opened softly. Hannah stepped in. Calm, respectful, completely. Unaware of the hurricane she had just walked into, Claire stared at her as if the world had tilted. Ethan muttered under his breath, "You've got to be kidding." Hannah spoke gently. "Mr. Warren?" Grace said I should come when called. I looked at my daughter. Her face went pale, and in that quiet moment, without shouting, without drama, without a single raised voice, everything changed. Because in the next chapter, the truth of Lily's intention is finally read aloud, and the final gift breaks the room open. I didn't plan on reading Lily's words aloud, but when I saw Claire's face as Hannah stepped into the room, I knew silence would only make things worse. The air in Grace's conference room felt tight, heavy enough that even the walls seemed to be listening. Claire's fingers dug into the table, knuckles whitening. Ethan leaned back in his chair, jaw set. Eyes narrowed at Hannah like she was an intruder on land he believed belonged to him. But Hannah stood near the door with calm, uncertain grace, her hands loosely clasped. Unaware she had just walked into the center of a storm, Grace sat down, opened a slim folder, and pulled out a single sheet of paper, the declaration of personal gift intention. I'd signed the day at the cafe. It was time. "Michael," Grace said gently, "would you like to speak first, or shall I read it?" I looked at Claire. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, furious, begging everything at once. "I'll speak," I said. I reached into my coat pocket and unfolded Lily's letter. The edges softened from being handled so often. The ink looked darker under the overhead light. I breathed in slowly. "Claire," I said, "I want you to listen. Don't interrupt. Just listen." Her lips tightened, but she nodded. I read Lily's words exactly as she'd written them. People change under pressure. Sometimes for the better, sometimes not. Kindness is a form of inheritance too. And sometimes it's the most valuable part. Claire's gaze darted toward Hannah Sharp, accusing. Refusing to understand, I continued reading. "There is a young woman who once helped me when you didn't know. Someone who showed kindness without expecting anything in return. Remember that, Michael? One day, the person who deserves my things will make herself known not by blood, but by behavior." The room went still. Hannah froze. Claire let out a thin, disbelieving exhale. Ethan scoffed under his breath, muttering, "Unbelievable." I lowered the letter and spoke quietly. "Your mother didn't leave jewelry to be argued over. She left it to be honored. And she trusted me to decide what that honor looked like." Claire's voice finally broke free, trembling at the edges. "Dad, you can't possibly think Mom meant her." She gestured at Hannah like she was pointing at a stranger on the street. "She didn't even know our family." Hannah stepped back, startled. "I never, Mr. Warren. I didn't expect you don't need to defend yourself," I said gently. "This isn't a surprise to you. It's a responsibility." Grace slid the official document across the table. Gift transfer of personal ITM's donor. Michael Warren recipient. Hannah Collins Attempts. Selected jewelry belonging to the late Lily Warren, signed and witnessed. Claire stared at it as if it were a betrayal written in legal ink. "No," she whispered. "No, Dad. You can't do this. You can't give away Mom's things. They're mine. They should stay in the family." "In the family?" I repeated softly. "Claire, family isn't something you inherit. It's something you show." Her face crumpled, a flash of something raw cutting through her practiced composure. "I am your daughter." "I know," I said, "and I love you. But loving you doesn't mean ignoring what you've done." Grace opened the evidence binder againly to rest her hand on it, not for show. A reminder. Claire's eyes flicked to the binder, the unauthorized insurance call, the missing property report, the timestamp of her entering my home, the camera recording of her taking the jewelry, the fake legal letter she pretended wasn't hers. Her guilt didn't show in tears or apologies. It showed in silence, the heavy, choking kind that exposes everything. "Dad," she whispered, voice cracking, "I just wanted to secure our future." "Our," I echoed. "Not mine." She looked down. I turned to Hannah. "Hannah," I said, "I'm entrusting you not with money. Not with value, but with meaning. With Lily's memory, with the kindness she recognized in you long before I did." Hannah shook her head, tears in her voice. "I don't deserve this." "You do," I said gently. "Because you never asked for it." Grace tapped the document lightly. "If you're ready, Michael, sign and finalize." I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. Not this time. I signed the final line. Sealing the decision Lily had nudged me toward long before she left. Then I handed the pen to Grace. She notarized it. Swift and certain, it was done. Claire stood abruptly, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. "You'll regret this," she whispered, voice raw, trembling with humiliation and rage. She stormed out of the room. Ethan followed, shaking his head when the door slammed shut. The sound echoed in the quiet office like the end of a chapter. No one wanted to admit was over. I exhaled slowly. Hannah wiped a tear from her cheek. "Mr. Warren, I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," I replied. "Just take care of what she loved." Outside, the sky had finally started to clear. A thin line of sunlight broke through the clouds. I thought the hardest part would be the decision, but it wasn't. The hardest part was waking up the next day to a house that finally felt quiet for the right reasons. The morning after the meeting, light spilled gently across the living room floor. Not sharp, not intrusive, just honest. The kind of light Lily used to say felt like forgiveness. I made tea the way she always preferred one tea bag, not two. Let it steep naturally. Don't rush it. Everything about that morning felt unhurried, calm, almost unfamiliar after weeks of tension. I sat at the dining table, the same place where so much had unraveled. Lily's letter rested nearby, folded with care. The final gift transfer documents were tucked into a folder beneath it. The house was still. No footsteps. No forced concern. No doors swinging open without knocking. For the first time in a long while, I could hear myself think. Around 9, I stepped outside to grab the newspaper. A chill lingered in the air, early enough in the season that even the trees felt undecided. Something white stood out against the dark wood of the porcha. Single envelope, a real one this time, stamped, postmarked, delivered properly. My name written in. Claire's handwriting. I brought it inside. Set it on the table and stared at it for a moment before opening it. Her handwriting was as steady as her voice used to be before all of this before. Pressure turned her intentions into strategies. On side was a single sheet of white paper. No threats, no demands, no instructions. Just a quiet attempt, Dad. I don't know what to say to make things better. I didn't expect you to choose someone outside the family. I didn't expect you to trust her more than me. I exhaled slowly. Already she wasn't seeing it clearly. I kept reading. Ethan says I pushed too hard. Maybe I did. Maybe I didn't think you'd understand what we were trying to do. I wanted to protect what Mom left behind. I thought I deserved it. I still think I do. Honesty, fighting with. Entitlement to sides. Of her, she never learned to separate, but I'm sorry for the way it happened. Way not the intent, not the lies, not the forced letter, or the secret entry, or the filming she didn't know was happening, just the way. I need some space. I think you do too. I hope one day this won't feel like the end. She didn't sign her full name, just C, as if keeping it short would make it hurt less. I folded the letter gently and slid it into the folder with the rest, because even apologies need to be documented when they arrive. Late, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't feel vindicated or victorious. I just felt tired, and then like a small kindness against the heaviness of the moment. My phone buzzed. A message from Hannah. How are you feeling today? 7 simple words. No demands, no pressure, no expectation of involvement in the storm. Just concern. I typed back slowly. Better than yesterday, she replied. If you need anything, food, company, fresh air, let me know. She didn't mention the jewelry, didn't mention the meeting, didn't mention what Claire had said or done. It felt like a breath after drowning later in the afternoon. I drove to Lily's favorite viewpoint overlooking the valley, the place we used to sit when decisions felt heavy and life felt too fast. The wind was gentle, the sky soft. I carried Lily's letter in my pocket. I unfolded it and read the last lines. Again, kindness is a form of inheritance too, and it rarely goes to the wrong person. Sometimes clarity isn't loud. Sometimes it sits quietly beside you, waiting for you to finally notice. By the time the sun dipped behind the hills, I felt something settle inside me, the kind of peace that comes not from winning, but from choosing correctly. When I returned home, the house felt lighter, open, unclaimed. No more unauthorized footsteps, no more drawers disturbed, no more soft knocks pretending to be care, just a quiet space waiting to be lived in. Again, I placed Claire's letter into the evidence folder, not as ammunition, but as closure. A moment in ink that marked her first step away from the chaos she helped create. Because in the final chapter, the truth comes full circle, not through conflict, but through a gift Lily left behind that none of us expected, a gift meant not for Hannah, not for Claire, but for me. I thought the story ended when I gave the jewelry away. I thought the last thread had already been cut. But endings rarely come where we expect them. Sometimes they wait in a drawer you haven't opened since before grief had a name. It happened on a quiet evening one. Of those rare nights where the house didn't feel haunted by arguments or footsteps that weren't mine. The sky was clear, soft blue, slipping into lavender. I made myself a simple dinner, washed the dishes slowly, letting the warm water ground me, and then walked into Lily's old reading room. It smelled faintly of her perfumed still light citrus, gentle and familiar. Her books were lined neatly along the wall, the spines worn from years of her turning the pages with quiet devotion. I sat on her favorite chair, the one with the slightly faded armrest, and let the room settle around me like a memory. That's when I noticed the drawer, the bottom drawer of her writing desk, one I had avoided since she died. Not because I expected anything painful inside, but because some places feel final once opened. Some drawers are emotional thresholds. Tonight, I opened it. Inside were old postcards, few photographs, a small notebook filled with her handwriting. In one sealed envelope, cream-colored, uncre, ASED, untouched, with her handwriting across the front. For Michael, only when you're ready. My breath caught in my chest. It wasn't addressed to us, not to Claire, not to family, just me. My hands trembled as I lifted it from the drawer. The seal was intact. She had closed it knowing one day I'd open it without anyone watching over my shoulder. I sat back on the chair, held the envelope for a moment, and let the weight of it rest in my palms. For a few seconds, I wasn't a man who had been manipulated or pressured or doubted. I was simply a husband holding his wife's handwriting again. I broke the seal. Inside was a single, written on the thick stationery Lily loved. The ink was a deep blue, her pen strokes steady and elegant. I unfolded it carefully. My love, it began. Not Michael, not dear, just my love. My vision blurred for a moment, but I kept reading. If you are holding this, it means the future arrived sooner than I expected, and I trust that you opened it when your heart needed direction more than reassurance. I exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that carries years. You were always stronger than you believed, but gentler than the world understood. That combination is rare. Protect it. I closed my eyes for a moment. She continued. I know our daughter. I know how she loves, how she fears, and how she reacts when pressure meets desire. She sees life as something to secure. You see it as something to honor. Those paths will cross and clash. When they do choose the one that lets you sleep at night, it felt as if she had been watching the last 2 months unfold. And there is something else. I straightened slightly. Do not give everything away. Not even out of love. Keep one thing of mind, just one that reminds you you're allowed to have peace. You gave me a life that felt safe. Keep something that makes you feel the same. My eyes drifted toward the dresser, toward the jewelry box that once held a lifetime of small, meaningful things. Inside had been Lily's wedding band, the only piece I never appraised. Never opened, never planned to give away. She had known. Of course she had. You are not losing a daughter, she wrote. You are rediscovering a boundary. And you are not gaining someone new. You are recognizing someone who is already kind in the moments where kindness had no audience. My throat tightened. Hannah's face appeared in my mind, not the day at the cafe, not the moment she received the brooch, but the quiet minutes in the hospital where she simply sat beside me, reading in silence. Live, Michael, Lily wrote. Not for obligation, not for tradition. For yourself, that is my last gift to you. The letter ended with her signature confident and familiar. Lily, I folded the letter slowly, pressing the crease with care. Then I placed it back in the envelope and held it against my chest for a long, quiet moment. The house felt different afterward. Not lighter, not heavier, just honest. I walked into the bedroom, opened the dresser, and lifted the small velvet pouch containing Lily's wedding band. I held it in my palm, feeling the metal warm slowly in my hand. This, I whispered, I'll keep, not out of grief, out of gratitude. The ring wasn't a memory, it was permission. Permission to move forward, to choose peace, to protect kindness, to live without fear of choosing. Wrong when choosing right felt quiet. Outside, the night air was cool. I stepped onto the porch, breathing it in, letting it settle in my lungs. It felt like the first full breath in months, and as I stood there beneath the soft glow of the streetlights, I realized something simple and steady. The story hadn't been about jewelry or inheritance or proof. It had always been about love, how it bends, how it breaks, how it returns to us in letters we open only when we're ready. And tonight, I was ready.